music, my face out.
All right, everyone, we're going to start in about 5 minutes. So no rush, but take your seats, and we'll be back in a second.
Hi, we're here at IBC 2016, and there's no doubt the most important theme running through this show is 4K workflows. So what I'm going to describe today are several new features of our EFS storage system that are designed to enable customers to have the right storage and the right storage performance at each point in their workflow. So this year at IBC, we're announcing a couple of new capabilities for our Extreme EFS storage system. The first capability I'll describe is the fact that we can now mix storage nodes that are driven by hard disk technology or storage disks that are now able to use flash technology. So obviously, when you're using flash technology, you have a performance-oriented workflow. Perhaps you're scanning from a film scanner, perhaps you're doing color correction or scratch removal, but invariably these parts of the workflow all rely on very high data rate signals, very high data rate file formats. So in an EFS today now, our customers can have groups of hard drives as well as groups of SSD drives, and then be able to tailor their storage to their workflow. I'll give you a quick example. Let's say you're ingesting from a film scanner. It makes the most sense in that situation to maybe ingest your content into fast storage so that you can be sure you capture every frame without any problems. So what our EFS storage system now enables you to do is set up a media space or a project space that lives exclusively on flash storage. And then after you've done all of your high bandwidth work, you've ingested the file, you've captured it live, you've done your color correction perhaps and scratch removal. Now maybe you don't need the benefits of flash storage and you might want to move it into ordinary hard drive space. With an EFS, you can now do that by simply changing the affinity of the media space containing that file. And in the background, the EFS file system will move that content for you into a new space. And the best part about that is you don't have to copy files, and client devices like NLEs, management systems, archive, and asset management systems never perceive a change in the media asset. So gone are the days of copying off files and making duplicates and the like. So that's a really important capability that I feel we've now brought to bear for high bandwidth workflows. Another thing I'll talk about is the fact that we are now allowing customers to choose from a spectrum of file protection. Up until now, we offered XOR protection, some people call that RAID 5, across storage nodes. And that's a very effective, efficient way to store off content and protect it against node failures. But one of the things about that is, whenever you're using a parity-based protection mechanism, for every time you make a change in a file, you have to recalculate all the parity. So it becomes somewhat computationally intense to do that. We've added another type of file protection called copy protection here, where it's much simpler. You might say, gee, make one copy of a file, or make 2 copies of a file if you want redundancy. And while that's not for every part of the workflow, for workflow elements that are database structure in nature, like Final Cut Pro project files and other similar database structures, it's a lot more straightforward. You don't have to, every time you make a small change in the database file, you don't have to recompute parity over and over and over again. So what we've enabled now with the new features in the EFS file system is the ability to pick at each point in the workflow the proper, most efficient use of storage and the proper kind of file protection to fully support all the steps in the workflow. Thank you very much.
Let's get this show started. Thank you guys all for coming. My name is Jamie Lovkin. I'm from Content Aware Solutions. We're the local video system integrator in town. So the idea is if you produce a lot of content, so a high quantity of content, or you produce a ton of high quality content, 4K, HDR, 360 video, we have solutions for you. So today we brought together some of our key partners to show off some new tech and some new workflows, and hopefully you enjoy it. The first presentation will be Brad from The Matrix talking about Sony and HDR.
Hi guys. Hi. Thanks Jamie and Content Aware and Dav for putting this together. Good to be here. I'm Brad. I'm from The Matrix, and we're going to talk a little bit today about first what The Matrix is and HDR workflows that we're actually we're taking content and getting it to air now in an HDR space. Click and it goes. Thank you so much. Excellent. So what is The Matrix? The Matrix is a private cloud for film and television content producers. Does anyone work with the cloud right now? I'm sure we've all heard the term cloud. It's very popular these days. We're a little bit different because we're a private cloud. So there are public clouds out there, Amazon, Azure, from Microsoft. Those have their limitations when it comes to film and television productions, just because of the size of the assets that we work with. We're all used to working with terabytes and terabytes of assets on a regular basis, daily almost. A lot of commercials, for example, are acquiring 2 terabytes a day. And for public cloud infrastructure, that's very difficult to work with. In an HDR world, when working in HDR, you're not actually necessarily acquiring any more media. You can work with HDR in an HD resolution with no issues at all. It's actually very effective. But it's those UHD shows that are really, really piling up the number of assets and the size of those assets. And you're going to need a place to put them. Brian is going to touch on where we put our assets very soon, so I won't go too far into that. But what the Matrix provides is unlimited, redundant, corruption-proof storage off-site. So if you've purchased a storage system from Jamie or from Chris at DAV, which I'm sure you all have, you've got an excellent solution for storing that content on site, and you'll be really pleased when you have your 40 or 60 or 200 terabytes on location, but then you start thinking about where am I backing that up? And a cloud like ours is a great place to do that. We're typically taking on about 15 terabytes of new assets a day. So to operate on the petabyte scale in the cloud is very, very reasonable. It's very possible to do right now, as long as you're in a cloud that is built for those assets, just like ours. Connected to our storage systems is a massive compute cluster that's dedicated to image processing. So we have designed this thing to take your raw red material and push it through to DNX or ProRes for your edit very, very quickly, much faster than real time. I don't know if a lot of you guys work with red footage, but to achieve 120 frames per second of transcode speed on a single stream of 6K is impressive. And then when you take a day of shooting and scale it over the entire cluster, you're looking at significantly faster than real-time turnarounds. And with the ability to watch this stuff online, you end up with some really interesting, fast, collaborative workflows and all the added security that the cloud has to offer. The whole network is backed by unlimited connectivity with multiple North American injection sites. We have facilities in Vancouver, in New York, in LA, in all the major production cities, so that you can quickly get a terabyte in and out of the cloud We are headquartered in Toronto, so it's really easy to do that from here. And a lot of you guys working in Toronto may start to see a lot of gigabit internet access being promoted in the city from Bell, Rogers, and Beanfield. Beanfield's a personal favorite because they are giving businesses, post facilities, production companies access to gigabit internet, so you can treat the cloud just like another computer on your network. This is perfect for UHD and HDR mastering and delivery for productions of any size. So you can be producing, you might have a really small project. I'm going to talk about the footage that is playing on the right screen there. These are 5-minute shorts that started off as demo HDR content and turned into an actual show that is going to air in the States and is accessible through a lot of Sony's new televisions through their apps that you can install on the TV and access this content. Some of the concerns that people who are getting involved in HDR have about the workflows is they end up doing a lot of research and learning that over the past year it's been a really difficult, there's been a lot of tricky waters to navigate, like just the idea of developing standards so that we can distribute HDR content effectively. It has been a challenge, but there's been we've come a very long way, and what you're seeing on the right hand side there is HDR content. And it's something that all Sony TVs are going to be able to play back effectively. So what you see when you capture your image and go through a post process in the $1 million online facility is what you're going to see on the consumer monitor when everyone's working at this level. So I'll quickly talk about what is HDR. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty technical stuff. I just want to give a big overview because I'm sure you've all seen a lot of HDR presentations recently. There was a Dolby Vision presentation at Deluxe recently. I don't know if anyone was there, but they talk a lot about the technical of how HDR is made possible. We're going to go just do a high-level overview. Brian, I don't know if you can put the same image on the left screen. Perfect, beautiful. So something to clarify really quickly. What you're looking at on the left side is not the same image in standard dynamic range. It's actually the image that we're feeding into the monitor on the right, which is the HDR monitor. So HDR is a display technology primarily. If you've been shooting anything on Sony FS7s all the way up the Sony lineup, in a log space, if you've been shooting anything with a red or airy camera in a raw space, all of these images we're capturing somewhere between 12 and 14 stops of latitude. You've got a ton that your sensor is capturing. We've never been able to see it. We've never been able to display it correctly in all its glory. We do all sorts of tricks in the online to make it look really good. An example just on the image on the left here, if we wanted that flat log image to sort of come to life, we would crush the blacks, we would bring the highlights just up to 100 so that you've got this sense of contrast. But what happens on a standard dynamic range display or a typical TV that we've been used to for so many years, you've got a limitation of about 100 nits of light output. A nit is the amount of light that is coming out of the monitor towards your eye. 100 is actually not a lot of light when you look at our environments around us. The sun, if we look out the window here, that's about 10,000 nits. So 100 versus 10,000, it's a huge amount of range. Our eyes are capable of seeing literally that much range. We go out into the sun, we see all the detail and all the highlights. Our eyes don't blow out like a monitor would. What we're seeing on the right side is a 1,000 nit display from Sony. That's the X550. It's a 55-inch HDR display that it's on their professional side, so it can display all HDR technologies right now, is my understanding, except for Dolby Vision. I believe that's no one from Sony back here. No, they'll correct me later. The 1,000 nit display, if we look on the right side, the highlights in the water. I love the shots with water because what happens is you have the sun coming down and reflecting off the water, and you're not looking at the sun, but you're looking at light that would have a value in real life of up to 10,000 nits. So you start to get some hyper-real images where you really do feel like you're there. One thing that you're going to notice, though, is that at the back of the room, when you're actually, even in the front row, when you're looking at this monitor, you're not going to notice a difference in resolution. It doesn't matter that it's Ultra HD. You don't really appreciate it until you're standing with your feet against that step up there, and you start to realize, okay, when I'm 2 feet away from the monitor, I'm still not seeing the pixels, and it starts to really get amazing when that image starts to get into your peripheries. Plus, you've got the HDR, the light level that's getting closer to what real life really is. That's when it gets exciting. So I encourage you guys at the end of the show, do put your feet right up against that step and look at that screen. It's excellent, excellent stuff. So this footage today comes to us from Blue Ant Media. They are leading the way right now, particularly in Toronto, when it comes to producing this stuff. This was done as a demo. It's some footage shot in Alaska on Arri cameras. And they originally wanted to just see what happened when they started to shoot this stuff and get it onto these displays. In the past year, Sony has come a very long way on both the consumer, prosumer, and professional side in getting these monitors to market. And that means everything you shot in log, everything you shot in raw formats, any cameras you were using that were capturing all that latitude over the past couple of years, you can go and regrade them now in HDR and give them brand new life. It is astonishing when you take a program, grade it in HDR, and then go back and look at what it was when it was SDR. And that's when you realize, wow, like the images looked like mud before, and we thought they were good. So things are going to get very, very exciting in this space here. What we're doing right now to help these productions basically get to this point is we're saying save your time on the research right now. There's a lot that's going to change still when it comes to the standards and getting this stuff to air. But what we can do right now is we can help you store those massive assets, move them around the world really fast without compressing anything. And we can actually take if you've got a UHD HDR ProRes file, we can take that and squish it down to a format that maintains all of its quality and actually can go to a US broadcaster they're starting to air things in HDR, and we can take it to basically any over-the-top distribution service. So any apps, there's actually an app that comes from Blue Ant, the Love Nature app, which is going to start pushing this HDR content to air. So we encourage you, whether it's UHD or not, it can be HD, reach out to us and ask us about how we can start to bring your content to life in HDR. Sound good, Brian?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Over?
Yeah. You up?
Yes.
Brian, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Do you need anything there?
No, you can just go out in front for that thing. Thank you, Brad. Thank you. Very exciting. I'm just going to switch presentations here, and I've got some cool stuff to talk to you all about from Sony. Okay. My name is Brian Chawley. I work DAV Solutions. We are a reseller of many things, and distributor of many things here in the Greater Toronto area. You know us probably through Tiger Technology, or maybe archiving systems, and Storage DNA, for instance. That's one that we sell. But another thing we're going to talk about today is a new archiving system from Sony, and I want to give you a little look at that. But first, you know what? Excuse me. Oh, goodness. You'll have to forgive me. I've brought up the wrong version of the presentation. It turns out there is actually a more recent version that is more applicable to you folks at home and here. So give me a moment. My apologies. We'll do it live, they say. So, we all deal with data, whether or not you are a content creator, consumer, whatever. You're taking videos of your kids at a bar mitzvah, you're whatever. But for whatever reason, we all manage data. We do it personally, we do it professionally. And where do we keep our data? Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, we're not going to talk about the cloud, because as you all know, the cloud doesn't do a whole lot for you when your data is any bigger than, oh, yay big or so. So where do we put our data? Well, we put it on a hard drive, right? We say, okay, yeah, we've got too much media for this project to edit off of our internal computer drive, so we'll buy a hard drive and we'll put the media on there. That's great. But then another project comes along, and you have to buy another hard drive. So you put the files from the first project in the first drive, second project on the second drive, and, oh, but they want masters in 4K, so we're going to need more space for that. So you get a couple more drives, no problem. The ones on the left are the projects, the ones on the right are the masters, and we're going to need to do it in French, Spanish, and Portuguese, so we wind up adding more drives. Now, this is getting kind of crazy. Wait a minute. Hold on. Where's that file? And before you know it, we've all had this situation. This is probably what the inside of many of your offices look like. And you run on a maybe well-formed or what you think is well-formed version of SneakerNet, right? SneakerNet. Move this file from this drive to this other drive and a bunch of USBs, and it's hell, and none of us want to deal with it. So what do? Oh, we get a RAID, right? Yeah, of course. We can take a bunch of these drives, and instead of them being scattered all over the place, we can combine the power of the drives into a RAID, and that's great. We sell high-performance RAIDs, like this is the Gamma 8 newest Thunderbolt 3 RAID from Acusys. It's pretty cool. And a RAID is great, but then your RAID fills up. And you can scale. Yeah, you can scale within a RAID. You can upgrade the drives, or you can add on another one. And it becomes the same situation, you know, if you have your storage all over the place. So what we need is something to act as an archive, right? Okay, well, that's LTO. We'll use LTO. That's great. Not quite. The issue is that our experiences with LTO thus far have been, I don't know, I can't really put it into words, but maybe this slide describes it. The user experience is not very good with LTO, and it's a bit confusing. It's not user-friendly, not easy to use, not the kind of thing that most of us, even though we use it every day, feel that we can really rely on in an instant. So, what this comes down to, oh yeah, LTO is great. Yeah, I have to describe all this to you, it's true. It is a standard, right? LTO is a standard, which means that it's a bit of a compromise. So there's not a whole lot of room for innovation. We know the LTO roadmap for the next X number of years. There's not a lot of room for innovation there. And when problems occur, if you've had problems with your LTO drives, you know you're going to like 3 different manufacturers for support. Whether it's the software side or the hardware side, everyone's got a finger to point, and not everyone's got a solution. Migration, when it comes time to move to the next generation of LTO, as any of you who have used it know, it's a pain in the butt. You have to move all the stuff off of their tapes, and if you've waited too long, you need to move it off to a RAID first, and blah, it's a drag. Not to mention, tape is tape. Tape can get eaten, it can get destroyed, it's susceptible to magnetic interference, dust, water, all this crap. You don't want to deal with it. And as I mentioned before, the user experience around LTO, because of the limitations of the technology, it's a bit of a nightmare. So, we like hard drives because they're really easy to use, but it's hard to organize, and they're not really secure for your data. We like LTOs because they're dense, and it's more secure for your data, but they're not really easy to use and kind of confusing. So, is there something in the middle, in between? And I think I've already shown it. And Brad, if you could do me the favor of lifting the black cloth. There is, folks. It is Optical Disc Archive, Gen 2. Basically, this is an optical-based archiving medium from Sony, currently entering its 2nd generation. And Brad, I'm going to ask you to pop that cartridge in for you. Maybe just hold it up and show the audience there. Cartridge-based media. We're going to get into all the details of it. Go ahead and pop that in there. Give it a good shove. And you can pass around the clear one if you want to see what the media looks like. So it is the latest and greatest archiving from Sony. They have a desktop drive like this. This is basically a USB 3 optical drive, and we're going to tell you all about the coolness of the technologies. And they also have a large library unit, so you can actually scale within your optical disc library up to 1.7 petabytes. So, okay, why? This just sounds like burning DVDs of stuff, right? That's not a good solution. Why optical? Well, these optical discs are not your grandfather's optical discs, right? These have a 100-year shelf life, which means that if you put something on a disc, like in a few minutes I'm going to put something on a disc, and 100 years from now when they're coming back and they're doing the demos for whatever's going on in 100 years, 720-degree video maybe, those files will still be accessible. The cartridges are robust. They are not sensitive the way LTO cartridges are to magnetic interference, even water damage, which we'll go into a little later. So they're much more robust media, and no tape to eat, right? It uses phase change recording. Again, this is sort of lends to robustness, but when you put something on LTO, it's a magnetic medium, right? It's a magnetic tape, and a magnet can destroy it. With this optical disc, it is a fully physical write. So when you write something, you're literally burning it into the disc. So it's really there. The contact is non-existent when you read and write. With a tape, you have a tape head. And if anyone here, does anyone here use an LTO drive? Yeah, okay, so you know, you gotta clean your tape heads, they have errors, they get all gunked up. There's no contact because optical is laser-based, right? And this is maybe the most important point. One of the coolest selling points of LTO or of optical disk archive is that it is migration free. What does that mean? That means Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 100, Gen 33, all compatible backwards to read. That means if I put something on this Gen 1 or Gen 2 cartridge today, and 100 years from now, when we're at the 720-degree video workshop, someone wants to restore that file, they can plug it into whatever optical disk archive system they have, and it will read. No migration required. It's very nice. And it's kind of cool. You get random access to 3.3 terabytes. That's the capacity of the cartridge. And you know, as you may know with LTO, so many times we wanted to just say, oh God, I know this file's on this cartridge, and I just want to put it in and copy it off in the Finder, and you can't do it. You can't do it. Why? Tape media is sequential media. It has to rewind or fast forward from one end to the other. And with optical, you get all the benefit of random read and write. And it's a UDF file system. In tape, we have TAR, which is we don't have a file system, and LTFS, which is open source. Good luck if you're having any problems with it. But UDF has been around for years. Matter of fact, if you took a CD, a compact disc, which is something that came out over 30 years ago, and you put it into your computer, you see the files show up, right? You see these AIFF files. That's UDF. It's a universal disk file system. Very cool. And vendor neutral. So let's take a little look at the technology. The Gen 2 cartridge is going around. It contains 11 disks in the cartridge. Each is they call it a raw archival disk. 300 gigabytes per disk, so for a capacity of 3.3 terabytes. The cartridges are a little bigger than LTO, but it's nice. You can draw on them, put designs, stuff like that. The laser is sort of an evolution of Blu-ray. So the way that it evolved is that the Blu-ray would only record in the groove tracks, but you can see a pointer here. There we go. On the right here, this records on the LAN tracks as well, so it doubles the density. And it uses two channel heads on each side of the disk. Basically, it has 8 heads in this drive, which is why it's so long. It has 8 heads, so it can achieve some pretty cool speeds that you wouldn't really normally expect of optical media. And it's the first and only 8-channel optical disk drive in existence. It's very cool. So we spoke about robustness before, and this was an internal test that Sony did, and it sort of gives away it here, but they took these cartridges and they submerged them in salt water, and they put some office staples in as a sort of control, and after 19 days, they took out the discs, they wiped them off, cleaned them with fresh water, because salt water is still salt, put them into the new cartridge chassis, popped it in the drive, and they were able to read all the files, no problem. That's pretty cool, and that's something you can't get with LTO. Now, what about the speed, right? Speed's important. Let's put up a chart. We got a chart. We like lines and comparisons. So right now, most of our customers are still coming off of LTO 5 with the read speeds at, hey, thank you, hey man. With the read speeds just over gigabit Ethernet or so. Now, LTO 6 improved on that and got it up to a usable space. A lot of people use LTO 6 today, really happy with it, happy with the read and write speeds. Now, LTO 7 really turned up the juice. But a lot of people who got in the LTO 5 and 6, they're not so quick to move to this because they've just made a huge infrastructure investment. They can't upgrade until it's time, right? And by the time it comes around to an upgrade, they're not even going to be able to take advantage of that speed. Ugh, this migration cycle with LTO. Anyways, where does ODA land in this whole thing? Well, it lands about here on the read speeds. So it's just approaching LTO7. Really impressive read speeds, and I'm going to show those off in a minute. When it comes to the write speeds, the way the lasers work is that they verify as they write, so everything is cut in half. So the write speeds are half, or 140 megs a second. So just to specifically say the numbers, 140 megs a second write, 280 megs a second read, which I think is really, really nice. And remember, this is just this generation. You can get in on this generation, and going forward, the speeds will only get better. So there is a library available. It comes with a 30-slot master unit to start, and then you can stack up to 6 units with more drives and more slots, or just more slots. And basically, you can get up to 535 of these cartridges, or 1.7 petabytes in a single rack. And that's pretty cool. It looks really cool, too. There was a video of the whole thing going. So how do you control that library if you do want to go step up from a drive unit, a desktop drive unit, to a library unit? Well, you need some kind of server in the middle to control the library, right? And this is where we come back to that archiving software. Everyone here uses some kind of archiving software, right? And you'll be happy to know that this is compatible, most likely, with the archiving software you already use. We like Zendata, it works with Zendata. You like Storage DNA, it works with Storage DNA. CatDV has an interface to many different things, and you can tie it in with that or different archiving applications as well. Works great. Works with your Avid. It works with pre-roll post from Imagine Products if you like that. And Sony also has a utility called Content Manager, and they've got a new good to know. I'll mention that. It works with EditShare as well. Yes, it works with EditShare. And they've got a new thing coming called Navigator X, which is a Sony media asset management suite. It's pretty cool. So I want to just take a pause for the cause here and do a quick demonstration. I've got all these PowerPoints loaded up here. You'll have to excuse me. There's my darn desktop. Woo! Okay. There we are. So I've got this drive plugged in here, and as you can see, that cartridge that Brad so nicely inserted for me shows up just like a drive on the desktop, right? And I can actually, if I double-click into the drive, I can browse through the drive in the Finder. This is something that we've been dying to do with our LTO libraries, right? But you can't do it because it's sequential media. I can go drill down into folders, see the contents of those folders. So here's like a XDCAM clip. Well, with LTO, we'd have to have some system where we've rendered off proxies and a MAM and we're viewing it that way. I just want to open this clip. Does it open? Let's find out. Opened this morning. I might be having a little window management issue here. You have to forgive me. Looks like my computer didn't read the script. There we go. It does open. So not only does it open, but you can play it back. And here's something else you can't do with sequential media. I can scrub. I can scrub to the beginning, the end. You know, and this whoops, I went all the way to the end. And this clip is a few hundred megabytes, right? So it's pretty cool to be able to have that random access to your 100-year archive, right? What about getting stuff onto it? What sort of complicated workflow do we need? Not much. Matter of fact, you can just take here's a ProRes movie, and you can just sort of drop it on there in the Finder, and it'll spin up that copy operation there. And so once that's done, that's it. It's on there for 100 years. I think that's pretty cool. It takes a second to spin up, but once it gets going, it's good. There it goes. See? Archiving. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. I'm also on a very overloaded old MacBook Air here. And hearing those last verifying things, and done. That's it. So that's on there, and we can play it off. It's my dog. Well, actually dog sitting him. His name's Jeffrey. It's nice. Okay, let's whoops, that's at the end. Let's take this thing home. That's Optical Disk Archive Gen 2. Thank you. Now, I'm going to introduce Peter from EditShare, who's going to take us through some EditShare stuff, which is pretty cool. And yes, as it was mentioned and pointed out, EditShare does work with optical disk archive. So give us 1 second to change it over, and we're going to hear from Peter at EditShare.
So I never knew that ODA could be so much fun. And now it's time for disk drives to be fun.
Make sure this comes up.
Here we go. Okay, so thanks for joining us today. I know it's hard to get away, especially when there's so many sort of tools to examine things on websites. Actually sort of getting up and going out is, sorry, it's a little...
Sorry. Would you mind getting in a little closer on the microphone?
If you wish. Okay. So I'm hoping in this session I'm not going to show any product. What I'd like to do is talk about the challenges and the issues that face us, and then I'm hoping that you'll come and have a look at what we do to solve those things with Bruno Forcier and Claude Ferguson, who we have here today. Excuse me. So my point is that we're in a pretty interesting industry where things are changing all the time. And I'm a real believer in Darwinianism. Things don't happen in beautifully smooth, gentle transitions from sort of one thing to another. They happen in big step jumps. So you have to be able to adapt, realize what's going on and adapt. That you have to react to the changes that go on around you. And that's never more true in our industry than it is today. For examples, we had, for 100 years, we had celluloid, and it largely didn't change. And then suddenly we moved to digital. It happened overnight, and we moved to digital. And that's brought about, digital television, proliferation of channels. There's huge amounts of, web content that's just exploded because of the ability to work digitally. But these things, they raise as many issues as they solve. With camera formats, for example, I mean, there's a new camera RAW format out every week, and it's a problem. You have to be able to adapt, work with different workflows to be able to cope with these things. It's not just the format, the codec, the wrapper, it's also the lookup table, the transform, the color transform to, make it look good. So, going file-based is, a big evolutionary step into a whole series of things that we need to react to. One of them, the size of the pictures is going up, the resolutions are going up. So whilst we may be looking at some things becoming easier, we then make it more difficult by increasing the resolution. We're talking earlier about raising the dynamic range. These make what we are doing today harder, but we have new tools with which to solve that. We look at things like shooting ratios. By going digital, we've allowed our directors more creative freedom, where we're doing things like this. I found this slide a little while ago. Mad Max Fury Road with a 240-to-1 shooting ratio is pretty insane, and people are going to have to manage that. As much as I loved your presentation, you're not going to find that by double-clicking on a file and seeing what it is and deciding whether you want it or not. You're going to have to work very intelligently. So this 6th century philosopher said that all things are in a state of flux, and I think that's absolutely true about our industry. It's just changing so fast. There's technology cycles, new technology, updates, upgrades, just so many things going on. It's pretty hard to keep up with what's happening. It's a maze ahead of us. The industry dynamics present some challenges to many companies. And one of the points I want to make is those challenges are not just for you, the content creator, but also for the companies who are trying to make a business out of offering solutions to that. We're constantly having to listen to our customers, see what the wants and needs are, looking at ever-changing sort of interoperable standards, base technologies, So both sides of the equation, the users and the equipment suppliers, are having to try and predict things, trying to react to things, trying to come up with solutions that are interesting to deal with the sort of fundamental changes in the way the technology is created, adopted, used, and consumed. So everyone's looking for faster, higher quality, more efficiency, and all of us are pressed on price. You know, the sheer economics are a constant pressure on us. So what do we really want out of this? That's a question. And there's new technologies coming in, like IT companies are saying, just throw everything in the cloud, right? We heard a little bit about the private cloud earlier. I totally subscribe to the idea of private cloud. When you've got the things like the image sizes, the shooting ratios, the different codecs. I mean, people want to work high dynamic range, high frame rate, uncompressed 4K for film work. That's 2.4 gigabytes a second. Even if you can get gigabit pipes to load it up to, say, S3, Amazon, the bandwidth that they allocate to you is minuscule. So there's just lots of things. It may sound alluring, but you've got to check it out. All of you need to be, you know, aware of all of the things, the difference between what might sound good from a marketing perspective and what actually is deliverable for you. So we want to do stuff to allow us to focus on the real tasks in hand, which is producing better content, meeting budgets, allowing us to make enough money in the process of doing that to be able to feed our families. And we want to do things like collaborate, so we're working beyond our walls or, you know, borders. So we, at EditShare, we want to share some of our vision for the future. We've got some equipment here, and Claude and Bruno can take you through a lot of the workflow things that we're promoting. So we have to look at you know, the industry trends, different camera formats, all of the different you know, deliverable formats that people want, the explosion in you know, high quality web media. One of our customers is Fender Guitars. They're shooting 2 terabytes a day, consuming that to make their videos. One of our customers is Apple, their HR department. They have something like 0.5 petabyte of EditShare storage for HR. You know, those kind of applications are just exploding. So we have to look at what makes business common sense, what works for our customers, and works, you know, for us as well. So what do our customers want today? Want value. Nobody wants some, you know, cheap junk. Nobody wants to pay for something that's just you know, you pay for a brand name. People want to have good value. So the content production technology companies have to listen to the customers, spot the trends, come up with clever ways to do more, often for less return. So I'm hoping that we can give you some of the benchmarks for value when it comes to what we're up to at EditShare. So more intelligent storage. More intelligent storage is interesting to people who, when going to buy a sports car, don't go, it's red. They want to open the hood. They want to know if it's double overhead camshafts, things like that. You've got to be able to have that under the hood stuff to be able to give the performance that people want for video. And if you're happy to get into that, I make disk technology fun. But if you're not into that, it is important to know that IT storage technology is not designed for video applications. It's designed for transactions. When you go up to an ATM and you want to draw out some money, that is a transaction. Whether it happens in 5 seconds, 10 seconds, it doesn't matter, right? But if you've got frames playing back and they don't come back on time every time, the human eye is very intolerant to that. And that's the fundamental level, the difference between IT storage and video storage. One is transactional, and the other one has to actually deliver the streams on time every time. So we need media asset management to be able to work out, you know, where things are, to be able to, you know, exist with these huge data sets that are going on. We want to have process automation so that we can use the technology to replace more mechanical or repetitive tasks or tasks prone to error. We need best-of-breed integration, so we can, operate with someone wants to choose a particular archive format, or there's a piece of QC software. We have to be able to integrate with those kind of things to give people the range of things that not one single supplier can actually provide. And we have to look at what is deliverable with cloud efficiencies. So ultimately, it's all about improved workflow. That's what it's, every part of this is about. We've got the demand for the picture quality, the different formats, but we've got to improve our workflows to be able to cope with them. And that means we have to collaborate. All team members need to know where the content is, what's going on, where to find it, and who's doing what and when. We need to be able to manage the media. We need to know where it is. We need to know the status. Is it online, offline? Is it archived? How do I get to it quickly? How can I control who deletes what and manage that? And we have to sort of think visibly about how we store content, how we retrieve it, to be able to do this well. We need accessibility. It's no longer acceptable to just say, you have to come to the viewing theater to see the cut. People want to log in remotely. They want to be able to upload, download, collaborate, beyond borders. Accountability, tracking the pre-production, production, post-production, what happens to the content afterwards, who owns it. And there's more than just the pictures. It's about the graphics. It's about the documents that go with it, the spreadsheets. And I entirely agree, you don't want to be struggling with removable drives. It used to be, there was a cupboard in the big online suite, let's say in a sort of telecine, and it was full of booze. Now it's full of hard drives. They all fall out when you open the door. So actions speak louder than words. That's why we have the technical equipment here. And I thought I'd leave you with this slide, because everything's about perspective. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now we've got a number of people from Adobe, actually, and I believe this is a sort of an announcement as well. I don't know how long it is, but how long it's been. But we've got on the line card for this event was also a technology company called Mettle. Makes some really cool 360-degree stuff. And so Eric from Adobe here is going to start us off, and a few folks are going to take us through a couple of demos, show us some of the latest and greatest. So come on up. Let's get you switched over here. And is that you there?
That's me.
Video here.
So let me just make sure I'm on the right page. All right.
I'm opening the screen.
So what do I play? Go ahead.
Long. Blue. That. You're on.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Philpott. I'm on the Adobe Video team. I want to say thank you to Jamie and Content Aware for putting the event together. And thank you, of course, all of you for coming here, and online. Thank you for coming. So just a question, actually. How many people here actually are editing or making content actually as your day job? So most of you, very cool. So I would like to talk a little bit about sort of who's Adobe, also a little bit about Premiere Pro, our video stuff, but also I hope maybe think a little bit about the creative process. And I know that creativity, that word gets thrown around a lot, and any word can quickly become meaningless if it's overused. But the truth is, understanding the creative process is how we all make a living, either directly, creating content, or by serving you, creating the tools and so forth for it. So actually, the creative process is the underpinning of everything that we're doing here. And I hope we can kind of explore a little bit about what that looks like and how that impacts what we do in our own software. So going back, true story, In the early 90s, I was a teacher in Germany. No kidding, I am a Canadian, but I lived in Germany. I was a teacher. And in that school, there happened to be a printing shop with real printing presses. The city of Stuttgart is a famous place for people where there's a lot of publishing houses. And as these old printing presses were sort of no longer used in commercial production, we had this tech teacher who would take in the machines, rebuild them, and I'm not kidding, the students would pour lead type, like actually pour molten lead, form the letters. The letters would go into something like that tray there you see, and the kids who took these classes, which was most of them, would actually do typesetting by hand, and they would make these beautiful bibliophile books. Each year they'd publish a little book with, you know, a German poem, and somebody would write an essay about it, like an unbelievably interesting thing. So I've always loved creative content stuff, and I love this. And although I personally didn't do typesetting, I did create my own readers and stuff like that. So there's this whole workshop for making your content, and I really, really loved it. And it was back then, or probably around 92, that I first heard about digital type. And I was thrilled because I was already curious and interested in typography. And so that is actually how Adobe started. So Adobe, the first thing that Adobe ever did was create the digital language to have typography appear like proper typography, like that example of Caslon there. And that was used, that technology was called PostScript. It allowed for printing. It sounds simplistic now, but before that, everything looked like, you know, a DOS command line or the Matrix. And after that, you could start printing pages that looked like what you saw on your screen. Wow! We take that for granted now, but that's actually where Adobe started. And that technology then became the backbone of what we today use as PDFs. So you've got a digital layout that you can share, and the layout is consistent. And then the design tools like Illustrator and you know, the big desktop publishing revolution, all that sort of thing. So that's sort of where Adobe started in this typography. In the late 80s, then Adobe brought in this Photoshop image editing technology. And then around 92, and actually I was behind the curve, because when I first heard of Adobe, it was typography, but 92, the same year, was actually when Premiere was first introduced. And that sort of sequence, let's say graphic design, image editing, to moving images, is actually the history of sort of digital content tools, and it's also the history of Adobe itself. So fast forwarding now, we actually are at the 25th anniversary of Premiere Pro. We've obviously come a really long way. But so just to sort of level set, what is Adobe today? Like what does Adobe actually do nowadays? And the thing that's interesting is that we have we span the spectrum from content creation, but also what we call Experience Cloud, which is all the sort of digital marketing tools. So for distribution and measurement and analytics and monetization. So the thing that sort of makes Adobe stand out and has sort of been a reason for Adobe's success these days is this having both sides of the equation, both how you make the content and what you do with the content. And I think that is sort of a hallmark of the way Adobe tries to approach, well, the business, really. So the same thing I would say for Creative Cloud. You're probably familiar with it, but Creative Cloud is sort of the current generation. If you buy Adobe tools, you're getting them through Creative Cloud. What used to be a box of software with applications or a group of applications, let's say for video, is now kind of an ecosystem. The software is still downloaded and runs the same as before, but around that and connecting that are things like the ability to share assets through the cloud syncing, so the same assets are on your different devices. I mean, that's practically self-understood nowadays, but pretty important for creatives. Organize libraries of assets, share them with teammates, and so on. Also, community, Behance is more focused around graphic design, but a platform where people can look at design, meet designers, get feedback even on things they're working on. a marketplace where you can sell content, Adobe Stock, and sort of a whole, trying to look at it as an infrastructure, which is probably the modern way that tools work and will work. But another thing that's important is building an infrastructure, having a comprehensive view, does not mean building a closed system. From day one, Adobe has always been very focused on interoperability, and many of the standards, PDF is kind of an obvious one, XMP, a variant of XML, which is open and available. Adobe has a long, long history of supporting and helping to develop standards. So interoperability is a pretty critical piece of our way of thinking. And for video production, for example, this means that we have literally hundreds. In fact, my day job is managing partner relations, by the way. And we have 250, somewhere even approaching 300 partners just for video, just the video tools, which means we literally have integrations with technologies in every part of the video production universe, from the cameras all the way to the end of the story. And that we are working like daily, actively interacting and helping, engineering, and sort of giving each other feedback. And so that's sort of the way we approach it, and that's had a lot to do with our success. In video in particular, we've come a long way. I mean, it's still a competitive marketplace. We certainly are aware of that. But we were really kind of the uncool kid not very long ago. And nowadays, we have sort of reached a pretty strong position. These graphs, I know statistics are things that can be used to prove anything you want, but just to be really clear, the graph on the left is showing perception. So we're continually looking at how people view us, like what's their opinion, do they think we're doing a good job, and there's a lot of data behind that, but basically you can see the perception is growing and improving. And the second graph is what's your primary editing application? That's for North America in that case, and we have sort of hit the 50, in fact we've passed the 50% mark. As we all know, very competitive space, that's good for you and it's good for us because it forces us, and we want to keep developing. We are definitely hungry. We're also having growth in Hollywood or sort of high-level feature films. We've had some really great wins there. But like I said, this is an ongoing process, and we're very active in sort of not just what we've done, but what we want to build going forward. So taking a look quickly at Premiere Pro. So that's Premiere Pro today. That's what a modern nonlinear editor looks like. You can see at the top, sort of you can tab through different workspaces. And just this is an example here. You sort of see the different tools available that are sort of clustered around the main task of assembling your narrative. So you're building your timeline, you're putting something together, and we put around that, arrange around that, different tools that you would use as you work on that. One of the things that we are famous for is dynamic link. We have this type of integration in a number of places, but nowhere is it more sort of well-known and liked by our users than in the example of dynamic link with After Effects. And what this means is that instead of having a baked-in effects shot, let's say, or baked-in graphics, you can sort of click back and forth between After Effects and Premiere Pro as you tweak and refine and sort of adjust your graphic. Maybe it's a motion graphic, maybe it's a visual effect, or whatever the thing is. But as we all know, it really is fantastic if you don't have to render or wait or whatever, sort of simplifying this back and forth process. And I just want to pause sort of reflecting on that. Like, how well does that work? There's an example that we're really proud of recently, which is David Fincher, Gone Girl. Now, I like David Fincher in a way because of the very structured films he makes, the mood that's amazing. He's just got a real skill as a storyteller. He also has incredible skill from a technology point of view. He's a very demanding director, and winning him as a customer we are very proud of because he wants a lot. And this film, Gone Girl, one of the things that's striking about it is that by the end, 90% of the shots were actually After Effects compositions. That is 9 out of 10 shots on that timeline, the final timeline, had been in After Effects in some way. The guy is a fanatic for precision. He's reframing, he's just cropping. He's taking this actor's take 2, and combining it with the other actor's take 4 because of the way, all this stuff, just tweaking. And besides, yay, cool, our technology works and all that, which is, believe me, we're proud of that. There's another thing about it that's really interesting. It almost points to like a different way of making a film than the traditional way. So when Fincher starts, for example, before he starts post-production, the film is already assembled. Like not roughly, it's quite well assembled. And for him, post-production is literally iterative tweaking, iterating, back and forth, tick, 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 tick. They're like the After Effects team was in one room of a house, the Premiere Pro team was in the other room, and that's what's happening every day, back and forth, as they slowly tweak, reframe, adjust, compare different shots, always went back and forth into After Effects. And that's the thing I want to sort of pause and reflect on a little bit, how we create. So if you think about, and bear with me or forgive me with this very simplistic diagram here, but really in most cases, creating some kind of content, whether it was printing, like the example I talked about before, or more recently, if we think about celluloid filmmaking, one of the things about it is that the processes are linear and even like almost like gated linear. So you have to do one step. When that step is done, you do the next step. Think about filming, you capture it. Then it goes to the lab with some instructions. The film is developed. Now that's almost it. You can maybe do a little bit of tweaking, but not much. Now you got the physical film, you cut it together and so on. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. That's an interesting process, but it's just one point I want to make about it, which is when you have a linear sort of structured production process like that, your creativity, you have to have your creativity at the beginning. You have to know what you want to do, and then you have to develop a lot of skills to actually sort of execute. So what comes out at the end is, essentially or close to what you want to do. So I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it is different. In a digital setup, that changes actually quite dramatically. Now, I still will go through the sort of the steps of producing a thing from capture through to delivery, but the tools allow me to play around inside the process. So now the creative or the idea part doesn't only happen beforehand, it can happen in the process while I'm doing it. And David Fincher's just one sort of example of that. He's iterating, he's tweaking, he's refining, he's just fixing, he's adjusting. He knows what he wants to see, but he's playing with the actual content inside the production pipeline. And I just sort of want to flag that as something that's quite significant about what we do. It allows for all kinds of new ways of creating content, both taking a long, long time to build it. Digital stuff doesn't go away. I can shoot it, cut it later, do voiceover years later. So that's one type of possibility or flexibility. It makes it possible to work on different devices at different times. It makes it possible to collaborate in a very direct way that wasn't the same type of collaboration when it's a structured linear workflow. And then finally, a very important point for our world today is that rarely is there only one deliverable. More and more, it's almost, actually you can think about it, stuff that you work on. Is there only one format or deliverable they want? Almost inevitably, there'll be different variants of the same content. So here's your finished project, but here's the way you'd put it on YouTube. I'm just making this up. It could be different types of content, Facebook, or it's going to go into the theater and so on. So the truth is, just as we need or we benefit from this flexibility in the creative process, there's also this immense need and a potential for flexibility in the output. And even cooler, because it's digital, which means I can always do something with it. If you think about it, each of those deliverable bubbles there in this very clever graphic that I created and spent hours and hours thinking about, every one of those little bubbles is like another idea. I could actually take it back right into the beginning and build something else with it. So there's a sort of a fluidity and connectedness that wasn't there before. And I'm making this big speech about it because I think it really is important to understand, why do we build the tools? What are we trying to do, we Adobe people, and I guess all of us really as a modern digital people. So one of the conundrums about, when you can sort of do anything you want at any time, that's really cool, lots of freedom. But there is a conundrum there, of course. How do you do it so that you don't go insane? Like, what do you do where? So this is one of the questions that we, the Adobe Video team, is actively asking and pursuing. Example, what should you do in your editing workspace, and when is the moment when this particular thing you're working on is too complex? It's better to be in a dedicated workspace, right? I'm not saying there's, by the way, like a hard and fast rule. It's sort of a thing you kind of work with, but that's the question we're asking. Here's an example. We recently introduced the Essential Sound panel, and this is, an example. A lot of video editors, they understand that sound is half the picture, but they don't necessarily have the background. And in the past, to be fair, audio tools have been fairly complex. So here is an example, a very simple panel. You can tag clips in your timeline and identify it as different types of audio. And then the panel opens up and gives you a few sliders, and you're already doing pretty advanced adjustments without having to take a ton of time or even know how to use Adobe Audition or an audio tool. Then if you were to go into Adobe Audition, the things that you've adjusted, you can see, you can go under the hood, as it were, right? So this is an example of trying to find that sweet spot where you've got enough tools to bring the content to 80, 90%, let's say, and that might be enough in many cases. Or when you do pass it on to, let's say, the audio engineer, you're giving them a lot of information about how you want this to be. And they are not starting from zero, they're starting with a really good idea. You're able to sort of show how you want that to work. So that's one example. We do that, of course, with graphics. In fact, one of the things we did is, besides dynamic link, is this new motion graphics template. So you can actually have a dynamic or adjustable template for graphics and use it inside Premiere Pro without even going to After Effects. Pretty interesting new technology. The other thing I was speaking about was multiple deliverables. I think there's, I think we're doing really good stuff here, and I think we can do more. But just want to point this out. An obvious example is captioning. Facebook by now, best practice is that you'd have, silent play captions. That gets people's attention. But also, of course, it's the quickest way to make content available to people who speak a different language, obviously. And same thing with our destination publishing. So Media Encoder, this is the companion application that does the rendering, allows you to set up presets for, YouTube, Facebook, maybe Behance also, whatever, FTPs, etc. And you can just sort of take your project, drop it in there, and let it do all the work, and it will sort of spit out and even post to the accounts that you've put in for YouTube or whatever. So sort of supporting this, making it simple to take the one set of content and spread it out. A lot of that can and should be automated, and we've made some good steps in that direction. Other things about it, another part of it is, of course, collaboration. So we have a feature we've been rolling out and evolving, team projects. It's very simple in a way, which is simply a shared project file. But the point is that then where your assets and your teammates are, wherever they are, but it makes it simple to have a way of working with a group of people, including editors and motion graphics artists, in the same project. There's a check-in, check-out system. It's almost so seamless that you could work in it and not quite realize you're working in it. But it is sort of another aspect of this, sort of taking the digital creative space and connecting people to it. Just to mention this is a new thing we've built. This is audience analytics. So taking some of the measurement tools for audience analytics from our marketing or digital marketing tool set and bringing a set into Premiere Pro. And believe it or not, there really are people who live and die by this kind of data. And so we've created this panel where they can actually track different aspects of their content online and see, how it's performing, and then use that data to, let's say they're doing a series or making the next chapter or whatever it is, they can reference that as they sort of see, well, where did the audience respond and so on. It's a really interesting area, and it's the kind of thing we want. It's beta, but it's very broad beta, and it's the kind of thing we're looking for feedback, a really interesting area. Moving along. Just want to mention another one is, the facilitating selling and buying content. So Adobe has Adobe Stock. It used to be, someone remember the name of Adobe Stock? It's a stock service, but we've built it right into the application, so you can either source content, so you got your video ready, but you really need a shot of cows in a field, I don't know, some random thing, and you can find it. And vice versa, you've done this project and you've got some really cool assets, you've got some great shots of water and cliffs and whatever, you don't have anything that you need for it, you own it, you can submit it right from your application to Adobe Stock and start using that to generate revenue. And this is really quite common. Most content creators have some stuff somewhere that, well, this is one way you can put it to use and hopefully make some money on it. And then finally, this is also an important thing and one way in which our model of sort of consistent updates. So Creative Cloud is a membership, you pay and you have access. And it also means that we're updating more consistently. And in the video business, I don't need to tell you that's been quite important because camera formats, all kinds of things are always changing. And so with this setup, we are able to sort of really make sure that the customers are always able to work with the new camera formats they're dealing with. And on that note, I will, in a second, pass the torch to the next presenter. Right here, I happen to have VR as an example of it's not really a format, but a type of media, let's say. And actually, very recently, I don't know, maybe you've heard, maybe not, but we had some big news at Adobe and the Adobe video team, and we acquired the technology created by Mettle, SkyBox. So Mettle has created some incredible tools for expanding what you can do with VR content inside After Effects and Premiere Pro. And we recently announced the acquisition of these SkyBox tools, and I think even better, the acquisition of Chris Babadas, our new colleague right here. Perhaps you've seen him before in the Mettle capacity. So this is the first time in Canada anyone sees Chris Babadas as an Adobe teammate. So, welcome.
Just a quick changeover, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Everyone brings their own computer. So we need to provide the opportunity. Oh, you're good? Okay. Bring up your Prezzo.
Yep. Okay. Hi. How are you? I'm Chris. Sure. I'm Chris. So a bit of background. So Mettle started way back in the age of dinosaurs, right about 1992. It started off as a production company serving advertising agencies in Canada primarily. So one of our claim to fames was, if you looked outside at outdoor media, you probably saw Mettle work. 90% of the jobs went through Mettle way back when, through advertising agencies. So over the course of
time, in the mid-90s, we adopted the Adobe products very early on. We decided to become a desktop shop and not commit to dedicated systems for many reasons. Comfort level, ease of use, cost, of course, relative to the market. So in the mid-90s, we started to develop tool sets to complement the Adobe products. We actually started with After Effects and created a product that some of you may have seen in 2010 bundled with After Effects, which was Freeform. We created that, bundled it for a couple of years. Ramp, let's go forward in time to about 2010. We're still mostly a production company, but we do have products, right? And one of our customers turned to us and asked us to help them with a 360 project. And there are no real tools to deliver on what that script or what those objectives called for. So the script asked for the 360 piece to tell a story. So this is about the Oculus DK2 era. So that's the Developer Kit 2 era. That's right before they launched the official Oculus Rift, right? So most experiences back then were experiential. Basically, it would be stick a camera on a roller coaster and just let her rip. Trim it a bit and you're done. That's your 360 VR piece, right? As they saw it back then. So we basically DIY'd a process in After Effects and delivered on a project. When we delivered on that project, we found out that YouTube was going to support 360. We had always wanted to become more of a product company at Mettle, and I turned to my partner and I said, this is the opportunity to do that. So, as we're evolving and as we're moving forward, we're seeing a lot of success. We actually dropped the whole of the service business to focus on product. So that DIY became the products that won the hearts and minds of content creators in 360, as we know it right now. So as we're growing and being successful and killing ourselves, quite frankly, traveling and working and working and working, this happens. So mid-April, we announced a collaboration with Facebook to bring all that is depth-based tools to 360. So things that we take for granted in regular production, like depth of field, like masking techniques based on depth, are very difficult to pull off in 360. So Facebook joined forces with Mettle, and we started to create tool sets. We did tech demos at NAB, and content creators in this space just went bananas because it helps you tell a story. Depth of field is a storytelling device, and it makes your life easier. With depth-based masking, they also did a tech demo on. Anyway, I'll get into that afterwards. You'll see a list of little things that they actually are built. This is part of the acquisition with Adobe, by the way. So all these tools will make their way into your tool set as well down the road. So that happens, and that's exciting, and it's wonderful. But then this happens, and it's even more exciting, right? So that segues into my role as Director of Immersive right now for Adobe. Mettle will continue with my co-founder and partner, but my role right now is to lead the efforts and identify new opportunities in all that is immersive for Adobe. Cool? Good. Okay. So it won't be called this because it's moving. All of this is moving over to the Adobe paradigm. But basically, some of the tools that we did do a tech demo at NAB were, it's going to support the Facebook Surround 360 format. It's going to support the Google Jump format. And at Mettle, they did depth estimations. And the idea there is if you don't have equipment to do acquisition, depth acquisition, if you have stereo pairs, the tools will do the depth estimation instead. So democratizing the whole thing, basically, so anybody can do depth. Cool? The nice thing about depth is it's the beginning of volumetrics. So volumetric means that you can start to move a little more freely in this space that currently is in a fixed state in 360 VR, right? So the first step is going to be So I'll demonstrate here. With an HMD or a head-mounted display like the Oculus Rift or the HTC Vive, currently, if you move your head this way, so a Z or a roll, or on a Y or on an X, the content will sort of behave accordingly. And that goes a big way to reducing the nausea that you used to get before modern day VR, basically. What 6DoF or 6 degrees of freedom introduces is 3 more, right? So now we did the head bopping this way, that away, and we did the X movement. What the next 3 are is I can actually start to move this away, so more of a pan, right? I can start to move up and down with my head, and I can start to move in Z a bit more. So that pretty much does away completely with most nausea that you're seeing, because it's reacting much like we do to the real world. That does not mean at this point that I can do this and see the side of your head or travel too far to the left or too far up. It's the beginning. It's baby steps towards volumetric, right? And at the end of the day, I think the 2 messages that resonated with everybody in the content creation community is, one, it's yet one more level of validation, and it shows commitment from Facebook and bigger players out there to this space. So if there were doubts, there's less and less doubts as to whether this is here to stay or if it will go away, this whole medium, basically. So that excited content creators out there very, very much, because you can't start content and stop where we are now. It's an evolving process. Technology will advance. We'll move further. And we'll get deeper and deeper and more volume, basically, data sets. So that's the kind of commitment that you see when a Facebook commits to something like this. So that was very, very important for content creators. But I think the net effect for people viewing the content is it won't be something that hits you in the head. You'll put on content with existing HMDs, like the current iteration of the Vive, the current iteration of the Rift. No new hardware. You're going to see experiences that feel and look more convincing, way better with no new hardware right off the bat. Because the technology is not just about producing it, it's about exporting it and having it live in the player that way as well. So the VR player, basically, that you put on, that you're watching your content with. So even early tests, it just feels and looks better. So where we started this whole exercise was about 18 months ago, when we were having discussions with Facebook and Google and all the major players. And the question kept popping up. What are your thoughts on stereo, Chris? What are your thoughts on stereo? And I would always say stereo's nothing without depth. That's where it really starts to pay off. That's where you really start to see a big difference. HDR would be nice to get in play, right? So you're going to see camera manufacturers coming more and more and having HDR capabilities. So the idea is just richer experiences at the end of the day. That's really what it's all about. So the freedom of VR, that's what I meant by that, with the fidelity of real-life acquisition, right? So you can do VR right now, and some of the rendering engines out there are very, very good, but it's still not this. And it'll take a while before rendering engines get to a state where they can do what you're looking at here. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of computation, a lot of heavy lifting to be doing. So depth of field is one tool. You can do rack focuses now without killing yourself in After Effects or Premiere Pro. It'll be very, very easy. Depth-based masking saves you a hell of a lot of trouble. So the idea is I shoot this room, no green screening, no nothing necessary. I can isolate you based on a distance because I've got that depth information that I can deal with. Okay? Doesn't mean it's going to be a perfect matte, right? Not yet, but it will eventually. Right now, it'll take you easily 70% along the way. Saves you a lot of trouble. A virtual dolly. That's what I was describing with you can actually take a still of this room, and now I can start doing this because I have enough information with my RGB and my depth data to be able to create geometry that resolves on the sides, top and bottom, moving in and out, which wasn't there before in 360. Am I going too fast? We're good? Okay. Not too geeky, I hope? Sixth off. I described that, and that's going to make its way. Sixth off is 6 degrees of freedom, basically. We currently have 3. We're tacking on another 3. Cool? And that makes its way into the player, be it the Rift player, be it the Vive player, whatever it is. RGB extractor is basically that whole depth estimation that we're doing, so you don't absolutely need to have this depth data coming from your camera. If you're shooting stereo pairs, we'll do the triangulation. There's some very interesting research that Adobe showed very recently where on a moving shot, on a moving monoscopic shot, we were able to extract depth data from that as well, which is phenomenal. So there's a lot of promise there, right? So that's tech demo. There's not making any promises about stuff like that, but it is exciting and promising. First kick at the can. Volumetric fog. So it's not even fair to call this volumetric fog because it goes way beyond that. I did a little quick screen capture, and I'll just play it back for you guys, and you can take a look at how it goes even beyond what some people are calling volumetric fog. So it's as simple as drag and drop. And anyway, I should shut up and you can just watch this. So that's our player that you can actually download now for free. That shows you what it looks like in an HMD or in a browser. So this is the fun part. You can assign color to your fog, but watch the next part now. Okay, so you've got like this brimstone hell effect, just like that, just by assigning a color map to your fog. And that's just the beginning. I'm sure I'll be stunned with what people do with it. Cool. That's volumetric fog. There you go. So that's the end of my dog and pony show insofar as where we were, where we're at, and where we're hoping to go in the next little while. I can do a bit of a demo if you'd like. I can take Q&A, or if you prefer, I can do one-on-one demos, or like a little group of us I can show you everything we've got so far. The most important thing out of all of this is that all the products that we were shipping are free in your account right now. You can ask for them, you can get them all. They're very easy to use. There's 7 products in all already. 3 for After Effects, 3 for Premiere Pro. The 7th one is that player that I was showing. It's actually in the bottom right-hand corner over there. See that? So you can go ahead and ask for this stuff if you're a Creative Cloud subscriber already, and start playing right away. It's very, very easy to use, especially on the Premiere Pro side. If you know how to do a transition in Premiere Pro, you know how to use our products. We stayed very close to the UX and the UI that Adobe does. On the After Effects side, After Effects takes a little more getting used to, but the long and the short of it with After Effects, what we found is when a typical user first sees equirectangular, that weird format that you're looking at where everything looks distorted, it just throws them off. They don't know what to do with it. So what we did in After Effects is we basically introduced the view-based paradigm, which lets you keep working the way you're used to working in After Effects, and we take care of all the 360 madness in the background. So the idea is you've got a 360 shot of this room, and I want to retouch this gentleman over here. I keep picking on you. I want to retouch this gentleman over here, or I want to roto him, or I want to change the color of his shirt or something. So what you do is with a simple click, you convert an equirectangular, weird-looking, deformed thing into a view-based system. So I look at you. I can take my camera, point at you, and then I work just like I've always done. I just sit there and rotoscope, clone, do what I need to do, or for that matter, the real use case for this was people started getting extremely busy out there that were involved in 360 content creation. So now there's this incredible pool of talent that knows how to roto, knows how to do VFX, knows how to do tons of things. You say 360 to them and they start quivering for the wrong reason, really. So what you could actually do with SkyBox Studio, as we call it, is I can actually say, here's one scene, I'll take one camera, lock it on you, I render that out, I send it to a guy. So now you're giving them a 16:9 rectilinear, clean shot, right? Nothing foreign to them anymore. You give them that shot, lock your camera, they do what they need to do, you grab that asset, bring it back in, plop it exactly in the same position, take care of all the madness behind there. I take another camera and I say, oh, I want to get rid of Eric in the back there. So I can take that out, send it, outsource it where I want. They'll clean them up, get them out of there, take another view, go over here. I want to inject a dinosaur in this shot. Send it to my 3D guys. You get the gist, right? So it's just democratizing. The whole thing has always been about democratization, and I think the biggest validation in all of that is being honored by Adobe and having them acquire it, and it's just going to make this medium just flourish, as far as I'm concerned. Any questions? We're good? See me in the back. I'll give you a demo. How's that? No, we'll do it in the back.
I'd like Jamie Lovekin. Ooh. I'll just grab the PC. Yeah, I'm going to get this back to you in a minute. There's so much technology in here. You hear all that buzzing? It's fantastic. I don't know. I might need tech support. Apple Store? Anyway, Lovekin to say if... Give me a second. This is...
Testing. All right. Yeah, so this concludes phase one of the event. We'll be moving upstairs to the patio for some sun and some drinks and more food. We'll all be up there, so, find us, come ask some questions, have a chat, and tell us what you're up to. So let's do it. Let's go upstairs. Oh, yes. Thanks, Brian. Adobe is going to give away a 1-year subscription to Creative Cloud to one lucky person here. So fill out the survey, and you'll find out later this week if you're the winner. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming.